Scott just made the point.
Jefferson used to be a lot more secure, not just.
Supporters who have flocked to Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump have at least two things in common. One, they're enthusiastic about changing America. And two, they're ignorant about the Constitution and about economics. Are we witnessing the final death rattles of principles in politics? And if so, what can we do about it? I'm PJTV's Scott Ott, joined now by Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. And men, when I use the term ignorant, I mean it in both senses. Some Trump and Sanders supporters are ignorant because they just don't know much about economics or the Constitution. Others may know something, but they're choosing to ignore it. They no longer find principled arguments relevant because, in their view, politicians don't actually govern by principle anyway. So what difference does it make if we elect a socialist or a populist? Now, sadly, we here at Trifecta and many of our viewers are part of that dying breed of people who not only know something, but who still cling to our Constitution and our free market capitalism. Now, Stephen Green, at this point, I think it's fair to ask whether we are the naive utopians who believe in things that never were and never can be. And if not, then can you map out a practical path to a principled future for these United States of America?
Well, we may be naive, but I don't think we're utopians. You know, when you look back, when the Constitution was ratified in what, 1787, there were maybe 4.5 million Americans, you know, mostly farmers, some merchants, mostly along the Atlantic coast, and starting to push into the Ohio River Valley and points south. But 100 years later, I just looked this up for a column I'm working on. About 100 years later, the 1890 census, which unfortunately the details were lost in a fire, but the 1890 census declared that the frontier had been closed, that 75 million Americans had fully settled this amazing country. And you know what? That census had been tabulated by machine, an early punch card mechanical computer. And in between, you know, we'd fought a great civil war that ended slavery. Our cities were booming. Our industries were booming. We were the richest, freest people on the earth, and we were just getting started. It's an amazing thing. So you can't tell me that this is utopian thinking. It's no place, because it was a real place. It was the United States of America. Yep. And I'm not saying it was perfect. You know, we still have the terrible Jim Crow laws in the South. Women couldn't vote. There were all sorts of injustices that we still had to get over, and we made a lot of progress in curing ourselves of those ills. But along the way, we also abandoned so many of the constitutional principles that allowed 4 million farmers to fill up a continent in a century and practically invent the modern world as we know it. We can get back there. Is there a practical way? I don't know. We can either do it the easy way by wising up and voting for principled candidates, or we can let it burn for a while and see what we can rebuild from the ashes. But I've got faith in this country. I've got faith in these people.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Stephen Green cannot be correct about this, because by 1890, we still didn't have a national income tax and we didn't have Social Security. So we could not have been doing that well in this country at that point. You better, I'm going to Google that after the show.
You know what we had? We had a federal government so small you could put it in your pocket. That's what we had.
Well, Bill Whittle, perhaps by this time next year, the Trump and Sanders phenomenon will be just a funny story about a freak occurrence. But I'd feel better if we actually had a plan to make constitutional and free market principles as compelling to the masses in the future as Bolshevism and nationalist protectionism is now. So how are you going to do that, Bill? Huh?
I live by my work, Scotty. To answer your question, though, there's two things I really do want to address. One of them is the idea of utopianism. Socialism, the socialist workers' paradise, is a utopian vision. It's killed 150, maybe 200 million people because it cannot be executed, because it's unexecutable, can't be done. People will pursue their self-interest, and no one will take care of a cow if everybody owns the cow. It's proven again and again and again and again and again. Socialism means everybody crosses the line equally and the race at the speed of the slowest runner. So what we're talking about, as Steve very eloquently said, is not a dream. It was, in fact, reality. And we had a solid century where, as he said, 4 million people went on to basically, fill up the entire continent. Now, here's the point I think is really interesting, because you put this very well in both of your questions, but I don't think go into principles that most people really understand this. And that's the connection between the economics and the politics. We tend to separate the two. We have the Constitution, we have the free market. But they're not separate. They're mutually dependent on each other, and you can't have one working without the other. If you're going to the whole purpose of the United States of America was to give a home to individuals where people could be free of regulation and free of aristocracy and free of this incredible burden of taxation and simply go out and harness the power of their individual desires. And for more than almost 200 years, that worked really, really well. The politics of being left alone encouraged the free market and the wealth and the spectacular growth of human lifespan and dignity and freedom as a result of the free market influencing the politics. Anyway, so we get to the beginning of the 20th century, and after a century of prosperity and incredible growth, we do what every other civilization in the history of the world has done. We assume it's the status quo. We take it for granted. And all the things that got us there, we change.
Yeah.
We're not going to spend a lot of time on the 16th and 17th Amendment, but if you want the country back, repeal those two things and it'll be done. It's just that simple. Repeal the 16th and 17th Amendment, take the income tax and this giant source of money out of the hands of the federal government, and then repeal the 17th Amendment so that the states are able to reclaim the power of the states against the federal government. And all of a sudden, we won't have this immortal bureaucracy aneurysm that's causing people to give up on their dreams and to just get on benefits and to go down the way of every other civilization in history.
Well, you know, it's enduring principles that form the bedrock of a society in which freedom rings and the pursuit of happiness is more than just a clever turn of phrase. As Jesus pointed out, a house built on sand can't weather the storm. The bedrock must come first, and that means that we must work to restore not only knowledge, but love of our Constitution and of free market economics. Nothing that endures comes quickly or easily. We must create heroes in the culture that reflect our enduring principles. And that means literally that we must write, produce, and sell those stories that celebrate individual liberty against statist tyranny. But it also means that as parents and grandparents, and anyone else in a position to tell stories to the young, we must protect them from the delusions woven into seemingly harmless baby books and TV shows and songs and any other medium that insinuates itself into the blossoming neurons and thus into the soul. The answer to the macro problems is in the micro decisions of our day-to-day lives. If we expect future generations to enjoy freedom, we must project today the joy and dignity that comes from our ideas in ways that people can see and sense and taste. Now, perhaps it's true that one man cannot change the world, but the world cannot change one man either. Stand firm, my friend, and live the freedom. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the entire Trifecta crew at pjtv.com, I'm Scott Ott.